We're good to go? Okay.
Start? All right, we'll try again. I'm Dave Smith, and I'm a systems engineer at APL. So to wrap up today's conversation, Jibu had asked me to go through the takeaways and key findings that we were recording as the event progressed. And we initially went through and put these into thematic areas or buckets. And so what we have here on the slide is the areas that we thought were some of the consistent themes that we were taking away from these comments. So buckets including requirements, test outcomes, facility availability and life cycle, business considerations, and then there's a list of other considerations that we put into a special category. The other thing that was a nice takeaway from the event is the level of engagement was excellent. So we had a lot of in-person as well as online participation. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Okay, so this is the high-level summary of the comments. So we took the list of comments or list of findings and then tried to put them in thematic categories and then summarize those. So we'll just quickly touch upon these bullets. The organization of facility availability and capability, as well as guidance for the use and progression of testing, will meet many of the demands for an LPG. So the idea was an analogy to TechPort. And so, I don't know, Wes, do you want to perhaps elaborate on that?
Hello. All right, yes. So one of the themes that we've heard a lot about is the actual organization of how we understand these facilities, how we can understand where to go and what to use. Those of you who aren't familiar with TechPort, this is kind of how you do it for finding the funding that you would need. So you put in, if you're a university, you put in some of those additional details, and then it'll sort you into the right way to find the funding that you need. So this is an analogy that came up a couple times that could help us think about one of the modalities that we could use for organizing those facility capabilities and helping users find those ones that they need. And that's something that we've heard from the community a few times here, is that there's some assistance needed in finding those facilities, getting the right access to them, as well as, for their different purposes, whether it's for sort of standard TRL advancement, or if it's for other purposes, accelerated lifetime testing, since we're intending to do things in a sustainable way where we'll be there doing lots and lots of stuff for long periods of time and completely blowing away the sorts of traverse lengths that we would have for typical heritage for our components.
Thank you, Wes. The next issue that we thought was interesting was an understanding of anticipated user demand. So we have a pretty good understanding, we think, within the community broadly, that we understand the existing test facilities and capabilities therein. However, in terms of what do we need 5 years from now or further into the future in terms of how do we accommodate larger scale testing, and the potential chicken and egg problem of how do we get the funding, and then how do we get those facilities put in place. So we thought, and actually in the Table 8 group earlier today, we talked a little bit about perhaps it would be productive to approach the community to perhaps get a better idea of what the future demand would be for larger scale testing. Next, further categorization of facilities in terms of what are all the existing facilities, and then what are their capabilities. We think that that would be a great way to identify excess capability, critical bottlenecks, and single points of failure. And that would go hand in glove with the survey of future demand from the community. Another consistent thing that we've been hearing from the community is desire for a larger scale proving ground for mission-oriented system of systems testing. I think a piece of feedback that I got from working my table today was that there may be some additional conversation and some interplay there in terms of understanding, do we want a network of smaller test facilities, and how do they work together? Do we want additional redundancy in there or not? And then is it possible to have a larger scale test venue with the understanding that, well, we can't really replicate the moon on Earth. The moon is the moon, and where do we draw the line in terms of limitations? Another topic that has been consistent through the event is the use of modeling and simulation, as well as digital engineering environments. On the one hand, the limitations of digital twins and how they might be used on a human-rated mission. Again, another topic that was interesting conversation point at my table today. Seems like there's still some work to be done there, but with that in mind, perhaps in a human factors analysis, that might be a good application now for digital tools. So that's an ongoing area of effort. Finally, how are we going to verify the Lunar Proving Ground, and how do we know that it's testing what we want? And are those tests, as we complete those tests, what do we do with those test results? So how do we verify and validate and potentially certify an LPG or not? And obviously that would be a venue-dependent type of effort. And there may also be another, I guess the last point that I'd bring from the table conversation today is there may be a counterpoint to that, which is, is certification too much, right? Are we asking too much? So there seems to be some interesting tension there that would be worth further conversation.
There's some great table conversations.
They were quite interesting, actually.
We got to get back into that, of course. So these are, and we have a couple of these slides. These are some of our findings, Dave and I, and Wes and some other folks. But after we present, we'd like to look for input from the audience here and online to say, push back. Are there additional findings? Where would you expand, or what would you edit in terms of some of these takeaways? Additional takeaways that we heard consistently are about IP. How do we protect IP when testing with, let's say, multiple companies are working on a single mission? How do we protect that? IP? Is co-working space sufficient? How about the digital aspects of the IP, not necessarily just the hardware? How do you protect the IP in an LPG? There are ITAR considerations. How can the LPG operational processes accommodate international collaboration? It's that tension of international collaboration, but also ensuring we're consistent with any ITAR considerations. And some other special considerations that we put into a bucket are, for NASA-owned LPGs, is the testing conducted under a NASA contract, or is a company requesting to use the LPGs? Another way to put it is, for NASA-owned LPGs, can commercial entities come and test that aren't for a NASA contract or solicitation? International participation is highly desired, but international participants don't feel that there's a clear path or guidance, we've been hearing, and that data is incomplete. There is a need to coordinate opportunities for data collection and engineering from CLIPS with facility V&V demands. So before we open it up to the floor, we want to highlight again the facilities database. It currently exists on the Confluence side, and you can access it through the Confluence wiki, LSIC facilities, but we're going to migrate this to the webpage, the LSIC webpage, I believe. So please feel free to populate this so we can have a shared resource. Because one big consistent theme is the testing facilities that are available and lunar proving grounds that are available. So this is password protected, so you need to join LSIC to access this page. In terms of next steps, that will happen.
Wait, real quick, sorry. On the previous slide, it
Yeah.
said to contact, sorry?
Oh, yes.
Sure,
This is a very exciting slide. I see people taking
The last
pictures.
bullet point says contact Andrea Harmon. Is it Anna Martin now?
Ann Martin.
Anna Martin, okay.
Contact
Just wanna-
Anna Martin.
It's
instead of Martin.
anna.martin@jhuapl.edu.
Oh, are we good? Thumbs up. All right. And we're going to have the community discussion now, but there also will be a roll-up report that is provided to NASA STMD that APL will put together. A summary of this will also be presented to Ascend by Jody, and a summary will be posted to the LPG event page on the LSIC website shortly after. And we also want to expand. This is the start of a conversation that we hopefully will kick off in additional monthly meetings for our respective focus groups. So with that, we wanted to open up to questions, comments, additional findings, both on Slido. Dave, are you managing Slido? Okay. And in person. So if you have an in-person comment, I think we're going to start with the Slido. Feel free to jump to one of those microphones on the stairways.
And I think for virtual folks, if there's a way that we could see in the room, like a gallery view of all of the folks online, and then maybe if you're online and you'd like to just use the raise hand feature, that might be a good way to sort of simulate what we're doing in the room where people just go up to microphones. I don't know if that's possible. Yeah.
Like such?
It's just Wes.
It's just Wes.
I think we could probably do like show participants.
I'm
show participants who don't have their video on. I think that's
I'm
an
showing
option.
gallery. So Bill, I don't know if you could show gallery. There we go.
There we go. Nice, awesome.
I
Thanks.
love looking at Wes though. So do you have any comments, Dave, from Slido?
Nothing yet. Let's take a look. We did get a question on the Zoom about, perhaps not a question, but a comment. How will facilities be categorized, for example, and why? And really, I think this comment was sort of aimed at all of the bullets, which is, how will we do these things, and what would be the intent, or why would we do these things? But we could start with the facility categorization. Right?
Yeah. So Josh, how have we bucketed facilities? I know there's like some broad bucketing. But are we going to rejigger that in terms of the facilities database? Or?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day after watching, I guess was it Robert Mueller's talk in terms of facility. Right now it's just facility, and anything from just like vacuum chambers to something that could help increase TRL. But, if we could start bucketing them in terms of facility versus analog site versus proving ground versus actual lunar proving ground. We'll keep that open because it's going to happen, right? I mean, so yeah, I mean, it's something that can
work in progress,
kind of morph going forward.
Okay.
I responded to that in the chat too. I think it starts with just measuring. If we get the details, then we can figure out the debate about how to slice and dice them and prioritize and which ones are applicable where can become a much more quantitative discussion instead of just, it allows us to make some more progress that is based on those direct needs, which are supported by both the user demands, anticipated and existing, and the facilities as they exist in the most comprehensive collection of them as we can get.
Thanks. Any questions in the room?
Yes, there is. So coming in, the premise seems to be we must have an LPG. And the question that's not on the table is, do we need an LPG? So that's this extreme. So I'm starting from here. But then the other extreme is, We need a very large environment like the dining area. That's a 40 Kelvin PSR for human system integration. So, where are we on the spectrum, and where do these facilities that we are envisioning, where do they fit? But we really didn't discuss, do we need an LPG? So that's something that maybe we need to rationalize why we need them. I know Rob's very insistent we need them. We can't send anything to the moon without them. So where are we?
Yeah.
Comment, not a question.
So Dave, I don't think we have all the answers, do we, Dave?
I thought you did.
Oh, yeah. But if people want to respond to these questions, yeah. and
I'll
Josh?
answer real quick. I mean, we have them here on Earth just for terrestrial purposes. So I think, of course, we're going to need them
Yeah.
both here on Earth and at the moon. Retrofitting something and augmenting it once it's on the moon is going to have to be tested out, and things like that. So at least that's my take. I just wanted to add real quick, and forgive me for derailing this. Something about this directory that we've been struggling with is how to keep it up to date. And so we have some people, interns, that have been really helping us out with that, trying to do that regularly. But it's something that's going to be important moving forward. And our current stance was to try to check in with people like once a year. But if it starts to become more dynamic, we might have to do that a little bit more as more information gets asked of it.
Yeah, I think a follow-up, I think Dallas asked the right question, and I think Josh also gave a good answer, and they aren't incompatible. So, do we really need something that we don't already have, right? We already have these facilities. We need to document what they are and the capabilities and all, but do we really need to do more, or do our current facilities do what needs to be done adequately for us to go there? And, we can't answer that question because we haven't decided what the requirements are that need to be measured or characterized at a, quote, proving ground. What do you want to call that? We spent a lot of time yesterday talking about names, but what somebody also mentioned is capabilities of what counts. So, we really need to, I think, maybe at the next meeting, talk a lot about what are the specific capabilities that need to be measured that we can currently do, and then that we'll need some help doing later on. And from my perspective, why I'm so interested in this, I really think that what current facilities don't do well is to look at the integrated operations of equipment and people, from different facilities. As I understand Apollo, it was, NASA did it all. But this is going to be a whole bunch of industry of different levels of technology readiness and ways of doing things, and NASA all working together and somehow have to integrate successfully. So let's do it on the Earth first. Before we get to the moon and find out all it doesn't work. Hopefully, I hope we address that at the next one.
Thanks, Carl. Dave, did you get any questions on the Slido?
We do.
Okay.
Okay. First one is administrative. Will we get a chance to review a draft of the roll-up report going to NASA?
Jody, Wes, do you want to field that one?
I mean, it's going to be like a couple paragraphs. I don't know if it's going to be basically what we've already said. I mean, so sure, if you'd like to, but it won't be anything more than I think what we've already been discussing here. But of course.
Yeah, so the summary that you'll see now, this is sort of like the hottest of washes. This is the hot wash. This is the scald wash that we're getting in front of you now. So if there's additional nuance or points that you need to be taken away, definitely let us know now. This is your firstest pass at doing that. I don't know if you showed the next steps slide yet. Did you already show that?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And Wes, I should point out, I mean, if Jody's presenting at Ascend, I mean, that might be
yeah.
the next point
So-
to check back in.
Right, so
There's a
the-
report associated with that, right?
Yes, so the Ascend abstracts that we've all submitted will eventually turn into like full-scale manuscripts, and so those, I don't know what the maximum page amount is, but like it'll be a good amount of pages. It'll be a full-on manuscript, and so that'll be submitted to Ascend, and that'll be a public manuscript, public report, and then of course there will be an oral presentation as well at Ascend. But the important thing, I think, for this community is that, yes, the full report that I end up submitting as a paper to Ascend will be made public. We'll probably put it on the LSIC website, and it'll be out there on the internet. You can get it yourself.
Yeah, multitudinous ways that you could reconsume.
Wonderful.
We have another Slido question. Is there a plan to have an LSIC working group for LPGs, like the existing 6 working areas?
That is a good question. I think the way that I see it intersecting with this, and it's, that's not a question that we've had yet, so I don't know what the answer is actually. But I see that this should be not just a single working group, but something that sort of permeates all of the groups that we already have. Would be my take on it.
Okay.
We have a hand on the Zoom.
We do?
Hand raised. So Gary Barnhard, could you?
Yeah, my video is not working, but I think you can hear my audio. A couple things that strike me. One, with respect to the facilities list, being able to begin capturing how it is that these different facilities can be accessed, what the TRL entrance levels are that are appropriate for each facility. Again, part of the puzzle that actually turns that list into actionable resources, I think, is part of what we need to be focusing on. And furthermore, we in line with what has been done in previous programs, we need to capture what we know and what we know we don't know about the lunar environment, and be able to relate that back to the available test and proving ground facilities, both virtual and mixed mixed systems and physical systems in those regards. In what I was referring to about past programs, for example, after the first test flights associated with the space shuttle, a significant investment of resources was put in to providing an environmental characterization of the vehicle, and an extensive coordination effort with the different communities of potential users in those regards. Being able to establish that that sort of foundation for lunar campaigns, I think would be of potentially of great value in those regards. And again, that's really capturing what we know and what we know we don't know, and paths to fill in the unknowns, if you will. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. I think that you draw a really good point about identifying TRL entry and exit points. So, Josh, sorry to make you jump up and down, but is that part of the facilities list or the plan, if the data is available?
It's not currently in there, but I just wrote it down, so.
The heresy continues.
Okay, on Slido, we have a comment from Pamela Clark. Whatever you call it, we need facilities to test any equipment/processes for long duration mobility/communication on the moon with realistic simulant. And then I think, it looked like there was a follow-up comment, but it looks like that might have been removed. So, oh no, I'm sorry. There's a sort of related question, which is, how big is big enough for a large-scale LPG? We already have simulant fields. At some point, just use the existing geology. So I think those maybe go together. I don't know. I'm not sure how to address that.
I'm wondering if Pam Clark is here or online, if you want to expand on your comment?
I can unmute myself. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, we obviously, now that we're thinking about long duration, and we're thinking about, putting an infrastructure on the moon, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you call it an LPG or a test demo site. We need facilities. They can be small ones, they can be large ones, but the question as to why we should even consider one at all. I mean, I think there obviously needs to be more places to do testing. It can be small or large, they can be in a vacuum or not. Just in terms of things that people want to test. I mean, they could be, you'd have to do something for most people, like something like realistic local terrain, and for trafficability issues, moving around on the surface, get something like realistic simulant. And that's what we've really been missing in the last 50 years in terms of what the next step would be for preparing to be on the moon for not just a short stay and moving around a lander, but actually long-term stay. And that was the intent of my question, just to, basically raise that comment. I'm very aware of, I've been very aware for a long time of the need for sufficient simulant to be able to do some of this testing. And I don't think there's any, I might as well make the other comment while I'm here. I think you could ask the potential users and right away get a set of requirements for the kinds of things that users are interested in testing. I mean, obviously one would be trafficability for a rover. We had some mention during this meeting, signal propagation, and something like a simulant that's realistically like the moon electrically. We're looking at Moorhead at terrain relative navigation studies also that would involve putting something in an environment that was more realistic for the lunar surface. So that's just several, and I'm sure there are many, as long as the user community gets roped in and basically they can tell you, I think, the kinds of things that they need. That was my comment. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pamela.
I'm not sure if we want to also address the other comment about how big is big enough for a large-scale LPG.
Does someone in the field want to address this? At our table yesterday, we had some great comments about how big is big enough, and the answer was, well, it depends. For some subsystems, a studio apartment size LPG is sufficient, and for others, you need one the size of Walt Disney World. So does someone want to comment on what systems would be appropriate for which LPG size? Yeah.
Okay. So that was my comment. Sorry, I sent it anonymously. But yeah, I was just thinking, how big is big enough? If we want to put simulant on a field, it doesn't make sense to cover the desert in a faithful simulant. I agree that a good simulant is necessary in some conditions, but electrical properties on a large scale in atmosphere doesn't matter. You don't need a very faithful simulant for that. So maybe an LPG, one aspect of the LPG is some kind of service that helps organize logistics to help take people to these big analog field sites. Or something like that, because there's some of those aspects that are hard to do, but you don't necessarily need to do anything to the site itself. It already exists in as faithful as you can realistically make it at a huge scale. So does that address some of that?
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Here's a question that is directed toward our colleagues at NASA, if someone wants to answer. The question is, one thing that was missing in this workshop was, what does NASA or other space agencies funding missions want as outcomes from LPG testing? So, thanks, Julie.
So when we're talking about LPG here, in my mind, we're talking about this idea of integrated or interface or systems together, right? So this is not a TRL scale item. This is not a systems engineering qualification level test. This is not going to get you to TRL 5 or 6 or whatever. This is for you to prove out your system can interact with the next system, right? And how to play with that and play with it so it fails and have that, and I used the word earlier, and it's both figurative and literal, virtual or sandbox, right? Kind of a literal sandbox, but also just to be able to do that. So it's not NASA pushing you to say, I'm only going to accept your hardware if you do this. It's what do you think you need to prove your hardware is successful and prove that it's going to work into a system, if that makes sense. That's how I view it anyway.
That's helpful. Anybody else want to expand on that, Paul?
Trying not to trip here. Well, one of the things that I've been participating in now for, 13 years is the Lunabotics mining competition. And this is a robotics competition where student teams come to test their robot for 15 minutes in the competition. Out of the 50 teams, only maybe 5 to 10 are successfully able to do the task. Most other teams get stuck. because they didn't test their vehicles in relative environments, relative being here simulant most of the time. And so one of the things that I've seen in many LPG plans that they have in various different places is that the interaction with the simulant is vastly underestimated, not just for the tests you want to do, but also as a facility, because very often you see tourists, people that come, visitors, right next up to the simulant, and just a single door between the test chamber and, let's say, computers and things like that. This is nasty stuff. We need to learn how to deal with it on the moon, but we first have to learn how to deal with it here. And dealing with it, and I do this on a daily basis in like metric ton levels, is not easy. It's very labor intensive, and it takes a lot of learning to deal with PPE and other things. And yesterday somebody saying, I don't want this lunar simulant because I don't want to deal with PPE. I agree, but we need to learn how to do that. And that's what the Lunar Proving Ground is partially meant to do at a large scale for full-size systems. Learning how this is going to break, how is this going to wear, how is stuff going to fail so we can address it before we go to the moon, but also learning how to maintain it or clean it. Because we have to do it here, and if we learn how to do it here, we can then hopefully do that much better out there. And the only time you're going to learn it is by putting hours on your system, by testing and testing and testing. And this is not just TRL walking up the scale, but also just trying it out, seeing what works. And we don't always know what works. And by the Lunar Proving Grounds, we can test full-size system, long duration. And that's the key thing that's missing. I can put stuff in my small vacuum chamber, but it can only drive like, half a meter. If I have to drive thousands of kilometers, there's nothing out there right now that can test that in a relevant environment. I can't test the wear because the facility doesn't exist. That, to me, is the piece that's missing. That's the scale that we need. I hope that answers that.
Paul, do you want to just expand on the vehicle driving facilities as well, and how that's not used to move the technology readiness level of a vehicle, but really it's just to push the boundaries and get hours on a vehicle?
It's understanding the failure modes in the first place, because when you deal with failure here on Earth, very often we just like think about mining machines. Oh, we just weld another slab of steel on it. It's okay. Well, I suppose we can do that once we have spaceship or something like that, but that's not typically how we think in the space world about how to deal with risk and factors of safety. And so understanding the failure modes is going to be critical in being able to better design for these systems. You're only going to find the failure modes by testing it. And like I showed on my slide, the furthest we've ever traveled on another planet is about 50 kilometers. And the Curiosity wheels didn't look so good after a while. And so how do we learn about those failure modes if we don't put hours in our systems? If they have to drive thousands of kilometers, we have to drive thousands of kilometers here to figure out how they're going to last, how they're going to fail, and then we can design better systems. And yes, you can test that on the moon, but you're going to get some really expensive failures on your hand there if you don't do that testing here. And we do this on Earth for regular cars all the time. We have literally hundreds of different tests going on in the winter for regular vehicles, trucks, military vehicles that come test in the environment and just put miles on their systems to see how they fail. And they really put these things to the test, even more so than you might actually see in a normal wear and tear situations. And so putting hours on these facilities in this hardware is going to be critical in designing them better so they actually are going to last when they get there. But we can't simulate everything. So there's still things we're going to be learning on the moon. We just want to minimize those number of things we don't understand.
Awesome. Thank you. Carl?
Thanks,
We're
Carl,
probably
again.
going to close this out in one or two more minutes.
Okay, I couldn't agree more with him that you really got to do a lot of testing at the system level in a relevant environment. I think we know much of what these tests are, and Paul knows a lot of them. But what I'm most interested in out of LPG is how do we ensure that when we get there that everything works together, the system, and we don't find like, oh, we should have been doing it this way. We have some incompatibilities because things just weren't tested out well enough between different institutions or whatever. This is different than, again, the single system, which must be like Paul says, not only high TRL, but proven to have adequate lifetime on the moon, which is different than what normal is. So I'd like to think of maybe these are different LPGs then. One does what we're just talking about, another one is more for integrated operations and things of that nature. No, you probably would not need regular for that one. And that's why it'd be great to have a discussion about what should these individual LPGs actually be like? What should their requirements be and the capabilities be for these different things? This is something I'd like to see follow-on meetings to really get down to that nitty-gritty stuff, so to speak.
Carl, your comment feeds into a question or comment we have on Slido is, can we create a questionnaire to survey businesses of their LPG needs? Having a firm idea of their desires will provide guidance for developing these facilities. So seems like, Wes, if you want to feel that, something that LSIC might put together to identify LPG needs, or Jody?
So I do like this question, but I also think that this workshop was supposed to do exactly that. So this was supposed to sort of be a way to survey your needs, the community's needs on what an LPG should be or should not be. So we can certainly make a questionnaire, a survey, something like that, but the goal of this workshop was to get at that, to get everyone in a room, to get the members of the community in a room and start hashing out what you all need and whether or not those needs are being met. So that's not really a good answer, but.
Well, I think maybe the question goes deeper than this conversation. It sounds like this is the start of a conversation, but eventually we need a detailed test matrix, right? That goes to testing levels, and maybe it's going to that level of detail that could be helpful for the larger community.
Well, we identified the documenting and organizing the facilities and being able to cut that apart. That's sort of half the side, right? We also identified documenting both existing as well as anticipated demands for these facilities. And Paul's just talked about some of these with respect to the advanced life cycle testing and so on. So I think that you're right, we're not done documenting those because we're also not done developing the technologies. So I think it will be not just a single questionnaire or a single one of these types of events, but we have now, I think, some more tangible paths forward for the content, or how we need to organize all of the plethora of things that we have available to make most efficient use of them.
So with that,
There's one more thing on Zoom. I don't know if you want to.
on the Zoom,
wrap it up.
okay.
Pablo had
Do you
a
want to
question.
pull that up? You want to just,
Sure. It's actually
or Pablo, if you want to
several.
unmute and indicate your comment.
Doesn't look like he's
Okay,
unmuting.
Dave, you want to?
Could lunar EVA training for civilians take place in an LPG? I think it's fair to assume we would need basic training and specialist skills specific to the moon in the not so distant future. The definition of astronaut could separate from space workers.
Yeah, we had a lot of comments about how some of the digital elements in particular could help with the human aspects, where being there and understanding it and having the sort of appropriate proprioception is necessary for being able to understand the ConOps works for you even. It's a very, very different experience that we won't really know until we have the degree of fidelity for that particular application, which is, you know, one of many. It's about matching the fidelity that you need for your use case. We heard that emphasized in several cases, that the human factors relative to the technologies that we're testing need to be considered both in the development of the technologies as well as in the ways that we'll be able to test them.
And Alassane, you can be the last one to close us out. This is going to be the best comment.
Of course it is.
No pressure.
To the last point that we kind of addressed right now, which is what the LPGA is meant for, the comments that maybe have not been heard, do know that LSIC has many subgroups and they have many breakout rooms. Whatever is not heard now, please present those during those sessions. We often document this. This is not the only time that we can address these types of questions and these types of concerns. So please feel free to reach out. And with the premise behind what LPGA is, note that it's impossible to simulate every single thing that you will ever see up at the lunar surface. So thinking about technologies that have the ability to adapt, to be robust, even in situations that maybe they don't take into account at the moment. These are definitely challenging areas. And I do encourage you to think about those types of perspectives. It's really challenging from a simulation perspective or in a facilities perspective to take every single thing that you might think or might not think about. So what are those technologies? And I, for one, if I see a technology that has the capability to adapt to those types of situations that they don't take into account, for example, would be ideal. And we often test for success. I think we should also test failures. There are extremes where situations will fail. To date, every single mission that we've ever, or operation that we've ever done hasn't gone 100% successful. That doesn't happen that often. And if it does happen, it's kind of a rarity to begin with anyways. So in those extreme situations, really consider testing for failure, not just success. Oftentimes that's very missed actually. Pretty much 90% of the time or something like that is just for testing successes. Thank you so much, and this is a brilliant conversation.
Thanks, Alassane, and I think that's it for our session. Dave, thoughts?
I have nothing to add.
Okay, all right. I'll hand it back to you, Jody.
All right. Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was a great sort of recap of things, and I'm glad that everyone sort of had a last chance to get in your comments and feedback and questions. And I think, as Wes said, this is just the beginning. This is just the start of this conversation. I think this is the first chance that we've had to sort of start really talking about what we're going to need and what you all need and what's even feasible in terms of trying to get at this LPG question. I don't have any more things to say. I don't know, Wes, if you have anything you'd like to comment on, or?
No, I think it was great to see everybody in person and have the conversations. This is all focused on what you need. So as you see things that you need, let us know, and we'll do our best to try to make sure that we're meeting them.
Yeah. Yes,
Thank you.
There is currently, thank you, Brenda, thank you. There is currently a live poll. It is called End of Day 2. It is a survey. It's on Slido. So if you go there, there's like a Q&A session or section and then a polls section. So if you flip over to the polls section, you should be able to see that. And this is just kind of our last-ditch effort to get your feedback on how things went over the course of the workshop, and just appreciate filling that out, please.
Yeah, if you want to be certain that your comments get heard, getting them documented, getting them written down, you can take the medical approach. If you don't document it, it didn't happen. So this is documented, and it did happen. Jody, can we put the stamp on it? This happened?
It happened.
This
We
happened.
did it.
We've documented our Lunar Proving Grounds workshop.
Yes, yeah. So, okay, great question. We have some upcoming workshops in LSIC. I didn't have the slides up because I wasn't sure if they were like approved and ready to go, but I would just speak to them. So there is the Surface Power Reliability Workshop that is July, what's the dates? July 26th and 27th. That's all virtual. Is registration still open? Mm-hmm. Registration is still open. So you can go to lsic.jhuapl.edu, register for that, for the Surface Power Reliability Workshop. There is also the Autonomy Workshop that is a joint between Extreme Access and Excavation and Construction. But even if you're not in those two focus groups, definitely feel free to come. That one's going to be also virtual, August 21st through the 22nd. And is registration open? Registration is currently open. And so I believe, but are you guys doing abstracts? Okay, no abstracts for that one, but you did, and those are closed. Okay, great. So definitely, feel free to come to those. Those are going to be entirely virtual, but they're both 2 days, but they're going to have some, really great conversations and discussions and talks and stuff like that. So,
And then the last thing that I would want to plug is the LSIC fall meeting at the Community College of Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as well as hybrid. So that's a great chance to get together and talk again with a lot of exciting sort of regional expertise that'll be in the area. Look forward to seeing all those folks like Astrobotic who are right in that area. Hopefully we'll get a chance to see one of their landers. And yes?
The abstract portal is open for that.
Hey, and the abstract portal is open for our fall meeting as well. And as a save the date, the day after the fall meeting, so that'll be Wednesday. So our fall meeting is October 10th and 11th. The day after, on October 12th, we're going to have a transition to commercial operations workshop. That's in partnership with a whole bunch of other folks who are helping to organize that. Just another sort of meeting of opportunity attached to that fall meeting. So lots of exciting things coming up.
And Wes, I just want to re-plug that autonomy workshop. We still are looking for a couple of SMEs, so it's fully virtual. So if you're interested in autonomy, August 21st and 22nd, look on the LSIC main webpage. Thanks. Excuse me? We have, we can tell you specific needs. Danielle and I are organizing it, so feel free to chat with us. We have lots of opportunities.
and so one more thing. So in the last, for the folks that are in person, apologies, virtual folks, there is the final page of your little program booklet has this continue the discussion, and it says, following the workshop, email any questions or thoughts to me, jody.burtis@jhuapl.edu. What's that? The QR code doesn't work? Darn. I don't know what to do about that.
The QR code may not work, but the email address does.
The email
work.
address works. The QR code went to the sign up page for the LSIC website. So I think if you just, at least I think, so if you go to lsic.jhuapl.edu and you scroll down just a little bit, there's like a sign up here, or sign something like a register. I can't remember what the phrase is. Anyway, you click on it and it takes you to a new page. Very quick little, if you're not a part of LSIC, super quick fill out. It's free. It takes like 2 seconds to fill out. And then you get added to our mailing list. And then if there are any focus groups that you want to be added to their mailing list, you just click the little check boxes and you can get added to those too. For the most part, I think that is everything. The only thing that I wanted to say, this is not relevant to this workshop. Okay, so there is something in the community that's Breezy Willow Farms. It's like this local farmers market. They are having their like fruits and vegetables and stuff like that in the parking. Let's see, if you walk out the door this way and you turn right and you go all the way down the stairs in the parking lot, they have like all these like fruits and vegetables, like this huge like local farmers market. It's from 3 to 6 p.m. I just wanted to plug it because I got an email about it today, and I thought for folks that are in the area, like if you like local goods and like local farmers markets, highly recommend going down there and grabbing stuff. They got stuff like peaches and corn and like pickles, like whatever you want. Anyway, it's in the little parking lot that's just like down there, so highly recommend. That's it. Sorry, that was not relevant to this. I just wanted to share it because it's really exciting. All right. Thank you all so much for coming to this workshop. It was incredibly successful, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Feel free to reach out to me on email or any of us, and we will see you next time. Thank you all.